Five. All right. What's good, everyone? Take Hazy back here. I wrapped up my 2025 Wrestlers and Matches of the Year. So I want to jump back into the NBA here as we are about at the halfway point. I think we're a little past the halfway point even. And right at it. And we're about 2 weeks out of the trade deadline. Trade deadline is one of my favorite times of the year. As a Timberwolves fan, until the last 5 years or so, that was really all I had to look forward to every year: the draft and the trade deadline. Hoping our fortunes turned around. So it's become one of my favorite things. I kind of love the wheeling and dealing of transactions. I think it's fun team building wise, and also as an accountant and stuff, I like the math problems it represents. So I wanted to kind of do a midseason check-in, also kind of talk about teams what I think will be buyers or sellers and all that stuff. So I think housekeeping first. One of the things you always got to pay attention to at the trade deadline doesn't make a difference really, like title contending wise. But teams that are really close to the tax are going to duck it. This happens every year. So right now you got three teams that are a million or less over the tax. Toronto's about a million over. Denver is 400,000 over, and Phoenix is like 250,000 over. So be on the lookout. All these teams are going to do salary shedding moves. Essentially, dumping a salary is going to save that team like $20 to $30 million because they'll get the luxury tax payout at the end of the year versus getting nothing and having to chip in a little bit. You're basically chipping in nothing when you're less than a million over, but you don't get the payout is the big thing. So the way that works is everyone that's over the luxury tax pays into that tax bill, and then every team that is under the tax gets an equal portion of it. So, right now we're scheduled to have 300,000 to 400,000 in the tax bill between the tax teams. That split it between like half the league, 15 teams. So those three will duck under it, making it 18 teams, lowering the tax bill just a smidge. But everyone gets a smaller piece of pie because they have to share it with those three teams. So Toronto is the main team here. So all these teams can do the same thing where they can just trade a minimum player to one of the teams that has tax room. Everyone, even a team over the second apron, can get a minimum player just to absorb them. I do think Toronto will make an actual trade. So OG Abaji is making $6.3 million this year on an expiring deal. So they can flip him and bring in like a $5 million player or less. Someone that can stay in their rotation because Abaji is in their rotation as the playoff team. I think they'll do that as part of maybe some larger team, larger trade. But they could always just dump Garrett Temple and attach a second rounder or something to him. Denver is kind of an interesting team to look at because their minimum guys are all in the rotation, or they're really young, cost-controlled guys, which Denver will kind of need long-term. But those young guys haven't really worked out. So you got Julian Strawther, Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett. Let's look at their rotation real quick just to see who's actually playing. It's not alphabetical on ESPN, which always makes it difficult to find who you're looking for. Let's see who's playing the least here. Daron Holmes only played 11 games, but I would imagine he'll probably stay in the rotation. Hunter Tyson's only played in 17 games. He started 2. Strawther's played in 22. Pickett's played in 29. So I would say they'll probably try to dump Hunter Tyson on someone at the deadline. Hunter Tyson in a second, just to get under the tax. It looks like they do have their 30-second tax second. So they won't have to get too creative. And then Phoenix, theirs is pretty easy. They have Nigel Hayes making $2 million, not in the rotation, end of the bench guy. Ship him off somewhere. So then the other teams you kind of look forward at this are your teams with copious tax base. Anyone can really absorb a minimum. OKC, Portland, Miami, New Orleans are all less than 2 million clear, so they couldn't. But everyone else from Sacramento down to Brooklyn can. Brooklyn and Utah still have tax space, so they get a little creative. But one of the things in the new CBA is if you don't use your mid-level exception or any of your exceptions, you can use them as a trade exception as well. So really any team with a trade exception could deal these guys here. So one team I think that could potentially be on the watch here is Detroit. So Detroit has the fourth lowest payroll. They have just under 19 million in tax space. I don't think they're going to make a seismic trade at the deadline because their team is good. They're the number one team in the East. And they don't have a lot of openings on the end of their bench. They do have Isaiah Jones, I believe is his name. He's making like 1.5. They wouldn't need to trade him. They would just waive him because they're at 15 players. Can't carry more than 15 players. Isaac Jones. He's got a little star next to his name, so he must have been like a midseason guy. But he's their 15th man right now, so they would waive him anyone they dealt. So in theory, they could deal with all three of these teams. They could take Abaji, waive Isaac Jones, take Hunter Tyson, waive Abaji, take Nigel Hayes, waive Hunter Jones, that kind of thing. Hunter Tyson. Detroit didn't use their mid-level exception, so they could potentially do that with some of the bigger teams. They could absorb someone making anywhere from 14 million or less. They could absorb him straight in. They would still have the tax space. And that guy could potentially be in the rotation. That's one thing I would look out for. That's what they did last year. They picked up Schroeder, got a couple second rounders for their trouble, and then Schroeder was in their playoff rotation. I think they're going to repeat the same thing here. We'll see if we uncover a name as we go through it. But I don't think they're really going to trade anyone. The only guys that aren't in the rotation are like rookie skill guys at the end of their bench. So there's no reason to really move those guys because they might develop over time. Washington traded one of their big expiring salaries in CJ McCollum to get Trae Young. So they don't necessarily have a big contract to trade other than Middleton. And their roster is pretty full with a team full of young guys. That makes them kind of an interesting trade deadline team as a seller. Because they got Alex Sarr, Trey Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, Cam Whitmore. I'm assuming that's Will Riley. A. Johnson, Keyshawn George. All these guys are on their rookie scale deals. I should pull up what these guys' actual names are. So would they be willing to move any of them? Just because there's a roster crunch here. They also have Justin Champagnie on a long-term minimum. Yeah, Will Riley, Trey Johnson. That's what Johnson is. Yeah, that was their first round pick this year. Oh, I named Trey Johnson. AJ Johnson. Is that the guy that was on the Bucks? No, he's a rookie as well. Okay. So a lot of rookie skill guys on Washington, which kind of hurts them with the roster crunch. They have their trade exceptions. And they have Makai Brandon that makes about $5 million. So they have the non-taxpayer trade exception of $14 million. They have Jonas Valanciunas' $9.9 million, and they have Kelly Olynyk like $13.5 million. So they can absorb guys without necessarily sending salaries out. They just have a limited roster space unless they want to cut or trade some of these rookies. And then Utah and Brooklyn have cap space. They have a lot more flexibility. Utah's got the three vets in Kevin Love, Kyle Anderson, and George Niang that I'm sure they would have no problem parting with. And then Brooklyn has Haywood Highsmith. Brooklyn's a pretty young team. They don't necessarily have a lot of open roster spots either. I'm sure they would love to trade Trey Mann and his 3 years left on his contract. I don't think anyone's going to want that. Cam Thomas is on expiring for about $6 million. I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of threw him in and called it a day with him. Probably hoping to get some value out of him, but I don't think it's going to be anything sizable. And then Memphis, Charlotte, Chicago, Milwaukee all have over 10 million in cap space as well. Milwaukee, I think, will be a buyer. So let's just jump into what the standings look like here. So your tanking teams, your teams you expect to be sellers. We talked a little bit about Utah, Brooklyn. New Orleans right now has the worst record in the league. The problem with New Orleans is they traded their first round pick already. So they don't necessarily have an incentive to tank. I wouldn't be surprised if they still did. They would love to get off Jordan Poole. I don't think anyone's going to take Jordan Poole. I'm sure they would love to get off DeJounte Murray, but that's the same kind of situation. Unless like Milwaukee gets really desperate, they can maybe do that. Otherwise, I don't think there's really a whole lot for them to do. They're also, uh, like I said, they're less than 2 million no, 2 million below the luxury tax, and they have never paid in franchise history. So I think New Orleans probably just going to sit the deadline out, would be my guess. Indiana is in a similar spot, oddly, to Washington, even though they were in the finals last year. A lot of young-term guys, a lot of guys on long-term contracts, rookie scale-ish contracts. Their only real vets are Siakam and TJ McConnell. They could potentially trade TJ McConnell. I don't think they will. Other than that, everyone's like on a rookie scale deal or on a reasonable deal. The one exception is they have Benedict Mathurin, who's on the trade block. He's on an expiring $9 million deal. I think they would like to trade him for like a rookie scale guy, get someone cost controlled over the next couple of years for him. He's one of the targets I have as a Timberwolves fan, so we might as well just talk about him now. The Timberwolves don't have any picks to trade, but they're most likely going to trade Rob Dillingham to try to upgrade the roster and go for it this year. The Wolves are probably one of the 5 best teams in the league, even though they're on a bit of a slump right now. Rob Dillingham was a number 8 pick 2 years ago, so he's the best trade asset we have, even though he's more or less been a bust. Minnesota is just under the second apron, so they can take on a smidge of money. They can combine players, but really what they need to do is essentially match money. They can only take on 10% more plus 250,000. So like to get Benedict Mathurin, you would do like Rob Dillingham and Leonard Miller. That gets you to 8.7. Add in 10%. That gets you over the 9.1 to get Benedict Mathurin. That trade would work. Indiana, no, it's telling me it actually doesn't work. So maybe they can't take on any money. So maybe they would have to do TJ Shannon instead of Leonard Miller. It's kind of a high price to pay. But if they believe in Benedict Mathurin, he's still only 23. You would just re-sign him. He would kind of be your bench scorer. And then for Indiana, they would get 2 sophomores, 2 years left after this year. Rob Dillingham, a lottery pick. Terrence Shannon, a late rounder. I'm not sure he would really play on the Pacers, but I feel like he's kind of got the Pacers mindset. That would be a stiff price to pay for the Wolves. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that and got kicked back like 1 second just to sweeten it a little bit. Indiana's got seconds to spare, but the Timberwolves aren't going to have much leverage. But yeah, I think Mathurin will be traded by the Pacers, and the Pacers will get what they can get. I would imagine it's someone probably ideally better than Rob Dillingham, but someone in that situation where it's like a rookie skill, 7 million or under guy that you got for cost controlled. The Wizards, I think, are just going to be an absorbing salary kind of team. They're a long way off here. I foolishly bet on them to make the playoffs this year, just because they were like 18-1, and I knew the East would be a little weird and a little weak. But it's still kind of who you would expect it to be ultimately. No big deal. $5 down the drain. No, nothing big there. Wizards don't really have any trade assets. Like I said, they could trade one of these young guys if they wanted to. Not sure how much trade value they would really have. I don't think anyone wants Cam Whitmore. I'd imagine they want to keep everyone else. But if someone's trying to do a big duck the tax kind of trade, the Wizards got a lot of flexibility to take on stuff. Like I said, they can take on up to 3 guys, 9.9 million or under. And then the Olynyk and MLE is a little higher than that. Keep changing my screens here. Sacramento, I think, is finally willing to tank. They're the 4th worst record in the league, the 2nd worst team in the Western Conference. The problem with Sacramento is their whole team is just non-desirable contracts. But I think they might be able to deal some of these guys to a desperate team. I don't think they'll necessarily get assets back, but they can maybe get out of some of these bad deals that they have. So they signed Schroeder to a 3-year deal, and he has not worked out for them at all. That's kind of the story of Dennis Schroeder. He's kind of bad on one team, good on the next, bad on the next. They're one of the teams I have eyeballed now with Jimmy Butler tearing his ACL. The Warriors are in a kind of do or don't situation here, is they got 2 paths here. They're way over the tax. They're basically at the second apron. They're just a smidge under, which gives them some flexibility, but they can't take on any salary. So they could do something to get all the way under the tax and dumping Kuminga if Kuminga's got that kind of interest. Like, for example, trading Jonathan Kuminga to the Nets for Tyrese Martin gets them all the way under the tax. You'd have to do a little bit of funny money moving the salaries around with a third team, because Brooklyn wouldn't have quite that much cap space. They would have to dump like K. Smith and maybe one other salary to make it legal. But you could do something like that, just kind of cut your losses with Kuminga, get under the tax, or they could try to trade Jimmy Butler's salary and make one final last push here. So one of the teams I landed on here was the Kings. So, for example, you could do a huge money deal here where you do LaVine and Sabonis for Jimmy Butler and Kuminga. You'd have to throw in a couple other salaries. You'd have to throw in Buddy Hield and Moses Moody out of the Warriors. And then you probably do Keon Ellis back just to juice it up for the Warriors, and either Westbrook or Doug McDermott. Probably McDermott, because they just need a little bit of size. And then the Warriors probably have to throw in a pick or two. You maybe throw in the 26th pick here. That's going to be like in the middle teens. And then you maybe do like a protected first rounder down the line. You could do one of those things that it's like, so if they did the 26, let's say they did the 2028 top 15 protected. And if that pick lands in the top 15, they get the 2 second rounders that they have, something like that. And if you're the Warriors, you get Sabonis and you get Keon Ellis. You get whatever Zach LaVine can give you, kind of as a younger Klay Thompson, maybe. That might actually be kind of fun on a team with Klay, where he's the second option instead of the first option. And then if you're the Kings, you probably never get Jimmy Butler on the court, but you're tanking. You get Kuminga, who they're rumored to be interested in. You take on 2 more 3-year contracts that aren't great in Buddy Hield and Moses Moody, but you stay just under the tax there. You get a first rounder, and you can reassess later. You can still try to shop those guys. So then they'd have a real logjam. They'd have Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, Malik Monk, and Dennis Schroeder all on 3-year deals, all in the high teens, double-figure contracts. Not ideal. You'd still have DeMar DeRozan on their team too. So a lot of overlap, but you're a bad team. You're tanking this year. You hope you can figure it out in the offseason. And you get 2 picks, hopefully in the teens out of it. Not a great return for Sabonis, but in this modern day, I'm not sure how much value starish players have anyway. Brooklyn should be involved in a lot of deals, I think, this deadline, as the team with $15 million in cap space. They've got 2 expiring deals in Cam Thompson, Haywood Highsmith. And then they got contracts like Terrence Mann, Zaire Williams, Day'Ron Sharpe that aren't terrible. You could throw Claxton in a deal as well. They got Michael Porter Jr., who, if they're tanking, they might want to trade, but he's making almost $40 million, which makes it a little tricky. But they have a lot of flexibility. One of the things that's tough with them is they don't really have guys that get cut other than Highsmith. I think Highsmith's the only guy that's not really in the rotation on an expiring deal. They play Jalen Wilson a lot. They play Tyrese Martin a lot. I think Tyrese Martin is their starter. Let's see here. Let's pull them up. So that's not an ideal guy to he doesn't start, but he's played in 33 games this year. It's not an ideal guy to lose. But he's also on a 1-year minimum deal, so not the end of the world if you have to lose them. They're also not trying to win. so he could be a decent little chip there. But they don't really have anyone to waive, so that's the one hang up on their trade abilities here. But I would imagine they're going to be involved in quite a few trades. They're one of these teams that has stockpiled picks. They got the 5 first from Mikal Bridges from the Knicks. They also have a bunch of seconds, so I could see them doing something similar to Utah or what OKC's done in the past. I think Washington is kind of set up the same way, where they could take on a bad salary, take on a first rounder, and kick back like 3 seconds to kind of sweeten the pot, just to stock up on first if they want to. They got something like 30 picks there. Brooklyn will be involved in a lot of stuff. It's hard to predict what they'll be. Everyone's going to want to dump salary there. But 15 million is fairly limited. Same story there with the Jazz. We touched on the Jazz briefly. They got the 3 expiring vets. They got about 10 million in cap space. They're tanking, so we'll see what they do. They also have Nurkic's expiring deal, which is close to 20 million. And then you get into the teams that can go really either way. Charlotte probably should tank, but they're not super far out of the play-in. And it's been a long time since the Hornets have been relevant. So I'm sure that fan base and ownership group would love to make the play-in. Right now, they're 3 games out of the 10 seed. So it's not super in reach, but they're finally healthy right now. They have Colin Sexton's expiring deal. They kind of nailed the draft this year. All 4 of the rookies are good. They got